Hello everyone, welcome to this talk. Just while we wait for all the attendees to turn up, we're just going to show a quick video clip from our sponsors, Production Service Network.
You're going to love it here.
Thanks to our sponsors for that video. Hello everybody and welcome to this KTV talk about the sustainable production landscape, sponsored by the Production Service Network. I am Chris Evans, the locations editor for KFTV. Today we have gathered some leading production experts to discuss some of the key sustainability issues covered in our recent report, including waste management on set, green initiatives and certificates, the role of sustainability managers, carbon emission reductions, new green technology, and the impact of COVID. Before we start, a few bits of housekeeping. I will moderate a 30-minute discussion with our panelists before we open it up to questions from you, our live audience. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A button in Zoom at any time. My colleague Jackie is happy to moderate today's panel. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Right, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have Hemini Mehta, Sustainability Lead at the European Broadcasting Union. Hemini is an experienced technical professional in all things digital with an angle on sustainability. She's been with the EBU for 5 years, overseeing the overall sustainable strategy and managing 2 groups, Sustainability for Public Service Media and Green Production. We also have Louise Marie Smith, Sustainability Manager. Louise has worked for more than 15 years as a consultant in environmental science and management, previously for government agencies, before making the switch to film and TV and setting up Neptune Environmental Solutions in 2007. She has since developed relationships with US studios and worked on high-profile features, including Disney's Into the Woods, Eon's No Time to Die, and for Universal Pictures, Fast and Furious 9, Hobbs and Shaw, Last Christmas, and Jurassic World Dominion. We also have Melanie Dix, founder of Green Shoot and the Green Screen program. Melanie is a film producer who for the last decade has championed the drive towards a carbon neutral film industry. She is the co-founder at Green Shoot and led on the design and implementation of the online platform greenscreen.org.uk with industry producers, stakeholders and crew. To date, Green Screen has been used in 24 countries and has reached over 14,000 crew. She also runs the content creation company Fingerprint with Jessica Hines. We also have Philip Holdgate, Head of Production Sustainability at ITV Studios. Phil has been at ITV for 24 years. His current role has the global remit to implement ITV's climate action strategy across all the broadcasters' production worldwide. And finally, we have Michael Moffett, Managing Director of Production Service Network. Michael co-founded the Production Service Network, a one-stop shop built to help producers determine where best to film overseas and whom to rely on for local support. The network of 50 service companies is working towards implementation of sustainable production in 100+ countries. Right, let's crack on with some questions. First off, I'd actually be curious to know what insights you gained from the recent COP26 summit. Melanie, do you want to kick us off there?
Oh gosh. I was fortunate enough to attend because we were delivering some trailers that we shot in India the week before, and it was an extraordinary energized COP, and I found it it's a dedication to solutions, really. I mean, on a macro level, is it going to work? They have to reduce carbon emissions globally by 45%. Not by 2050, but working towards 2030, it's a huge ask. And what I did find was from insurance company to campaigners to the youth movement, there was a huge coming together. And one thing one of my takeouts was that, and it is always about the next generation for me in education and sustainability. And it was, if you guys won't do it, we will. That was the takeout. And it was a rallying cry from the youth. And I say, go forth, they have to do it. And if we can't manage it, then they will. And, fingers crossed. And it was a very energized, I think the environmental and biodiversity, some of the strategies that were coming forth were really interesting, but I'd never seen cross-industry collaboration as energized in any other COP. So we just keep our fingers crossed at the moment that it's a positive, the outcomes are positive for next year.
Is it a slightly unfair burden, though, on the next generation to sort of lump it all on their shoulders?
Well, I don't say that to my kids, I have to say. Yes, it is. It is what we've created. It's quite terrifying what we've created. And, that's why we're very dedicated at Green Shoot to the next generation. It is terrifying. 4 seasons in one day, can't get weather insurance anymore as a producer, in terms of trying to get out onto set. You don't know when we were hailstoning when I was coming in today. So yeah, it is very unfair, I have to say, as a mother and as a film producer and as a sustainability consultant, it's unfair.
Hemini, your thoughts?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I wasn't lucky enough to be in the country when it was going on. So I have a sort of a outsider's view on what the perception was outside of the UK and general in Europe. And so it was very similar to what Melanie has said. It's along the lines of, I think from the broadcaster's perspective, I heard there was a lot going on. There was lots of broadcasters there. They were participating in content pledges, etc. And there was a lot of positivity around that. On the other side, sort of hearing it from sort of the national delegate side, as an outsider, it came across very quiet and very similar to the stories that we've been hearing, which was along the lines of that nations are not doing enough. So
yeah,
things will change. And I think it's a bit of a shame that everything's always lumped to the next generation. We were once the next generation where things are lumped onto us.
yeah.
And this just seems to continue. So it's actually quite scary that it carries on continuing, and some of the generations are not taking the bull by the horns and doing something about it. And I think we need to. I don't think we can carry on playing this game where we just move things on to somebody else later on.
No, true. And broadening it out, what would you say are some of the key issues of sustainability facing the film and TV industry at the moment? Phil, maybe do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think sort of on a more macro scale, there's just this general uncertainty, but people have got very stretched budgets. COVID just won't go away right now, so it's just generally challenging just to get the show on the road and get everything shot and in the can, basically. So how do you battle against some of these other really big issues and make sure that people are being sustainable throughout everything that they're doing and all the decision making as well? I think it's a real challenge for us at the minute.
Louise, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, completely agreed. The kind of burden of the need to do everything so differently because of COVID protocols and what have you is already kind of like quite a stretch on all crews and producers. And having worked through it kind of now for, coming on for 2 years. So I think I've been pleasantly surprised by how sustainability has actually stayed on their minds, and there hasn't been an enormous pushback in my experience, certainly not as much as I thought there might have been, given how tough it is to produce anything at the moment. I think almost that break last summer when everybody or last spring when everybody shut down, a lot of people seem to have gone away and finally had the time, it wasn't one production to the next and just get through the day kind of thing, and taken the time, quite fortunately, to sit back and rethink and really prioritize sustainability. And that's across a lot of different departments on crews that I've worked with. I think when they had time to kind of get together, there was a lot of makeup artists got together and they would chat on Zoom, and they put huge big sustainability sort of guides to what products that they would purchase. And because they finally had time to go away, call the companies that they provide to, and go down that supply chain and gather that information together, I think the will had been there, but the time wasn't. I think there has been kind of that's a small silver lining to the whole situation, I suppose, that it refocused everybody around it a bit.
You mentioned the supply chain. That's really key, isn't it? Addressing that in terms of getting the right companies on board who are green and sustainable.
Oh, 100%. Because if you think about it, a production company is, it's a limited company on paper at company's house, and then it's a group of people that you hire in, and then everything else we hire. Pretty much everything else, the space that we work in, which means the electricity supply that we're using, the camera equipment, that everything is hired. So if we can't work with the supply chain, we're kind of stuck. So I think that's a really vital part of the puzzle.
And Michael, what are some of the sort of key sustainability issues facing the network at the moment?
Well, I mean, it's interesting listening to Louise talk about the idea of, the chain, if you will. If you think about the fact that we as production service companies are engaging with suppliers, the line items that fill up our budgets that ultimately are being approved by producers, they're producers, and whether it be studios or brands and agencies that are coming to us for productions, are looking for increasingly for us to be responsible and sustainable on set. And it's their expectation that drives us to be talking to our vendors locally and to be raising awareness amongst them. And I think that, we as a network, having our boots on the ground in the production trenches of 50 different countries, and, and actually servicing more than 100, gives us a unique opportunity to raise awareness in markets that you might not even imagine at this stage, because I believe it's an issue that's been, the awareness is quite raised in larger markets, big film hubs. But I mean, take this issue to places like, I don't know, Israel. I was talking with our partner in Israel, and the awareness is quite low. I think that it'll turn around quickly, but what needs to happen is there needs to come in pressure from the outside, so that the local vendors and through the service companies' communication realize that this is an expectation that we have.
And is enough being done generally to tackle sort of waste management, for example, on set? Phil, would you say? What are some of the stumbling blocks still?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think getting the right systems in place is one thing. Getting people to use them is something completely different. And especially when we've got really fast-paced turnaround, a lot of work, really high workloads. Sometimes it's just easy for people just to accidentally not do the right thing. So I think it needs to be a bit of a joined-up effort to make sure you've got the right provisions in place, really good quality signage, that you've engaged with your cast and your crew and your supply chain to say, look, this is what we're trying to do. We want to try and eliminate as much waste as possible, but the stuff that we are generating, we want to be able to manage it in the best way possible as well. And we've seen some really good examples of what works well, and then I think it's up to the community to be able to, the TV and film community, to share that best practice and really learn from one another. So I think collaboration will play a big part in it as well.
And is sort of planning from the early stage key as well, Melanie, would you say, when you're obviously setting up a TV series or a film, making sure you have all the sort of sustainable initiatives in place beforehand and everyone knows what they need to do throughout the production? That's key, isn't it?
It is 100%. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have that buy-in from top management, your execs or your financiers, then it's not going to work. I've been on shows where runners have come to me and said, I want to try this, and you just can't. You have to have it from the top down and the bottom up. It needs to be a commitment for the whole crew to make it successful.
And is going green now proving more cost effective? Are there big examples you've worked on, projects you've worked on that have proven that it can be successful and you can save money? It's not all about adding costs with new green technology and things like that.
It's a really good question, and I think it's really exciting at the moment. I mean, from a producer's point of view, if I'm with the budget, I can see a cost saving. When I'm a sustainability consultant, or my teams are, and I'm just advising, then we don't see the budget, so we can't see the bottom line. So the more transparency there are for sustainability consultants, the better. So, on the latest film that we're budgeting at the moment, I know that there's a cost saving of over £45,000 on different technologies that we're using, different fuels, carpooling, because it's my show. So, and I'm, that's what I'm going to do. And we're having everybody sign up at contract stage. We have within our contract a green. If you don't want to join our merry family of green, pioneers, then don't join us. It's fine, but when we're doing shows like The Crown or working with Equal Access Network, you have to be so clever and strategic how you bring everyone in, and cost saving absolutely is there, but you know, there needs to be more transparency for consultants to be able to show that best practice.
And can you just quickly elaborate a bit further on your green screen environmental production program and how it's worked on projects like you mentioned the Crown there?
Yeah, sure. So it was an initiative we started partnering with Film London. Film London had an initiative back in 2008 called Green Screen, and when the launch of the British Standards Institute, BS 8909, didn't really take off, which was based on the family of international standards, ISO 14001, we worked with Film London to build a program that would be really simple for London in terms of, you know, points, mean prizes. How can we sort of engage crew? Crews are really competitive, and it's really nice to not speak about football at the lunch queue, but, you know, who's winning departmentally. So Green Screen was formulated to be a really simple framework to use, whether you are a one-day commercial or a 16-month production, you know, from cradle to grave in terms of its supply chain, but also from script to screen in terms of its development. And we've grown the platform over the last 7 years, moving towards gold on several sort of tentpole productions in the UK, but also my gaze is really on training and education, the next generation, and how we can bring those diverse voices as storytellers, as a filmmaker, but also to get their first leg into the industry. But we can only do that with buy-in from top management. You can't put runners on set if there's not, you know, buy-in from top management. So Green Screen has really progressed as the kind of appetite, I guess, for sustainable production has increased. And now it's carbon calculation, or we use studio carbon calculators, or Albert, or whoever, however, you know, wherever we want to do. If it's a co-production, we've just used the Trentino carbon calculator, and then we embed the sustainability, the same framework on each show, and it builds through, you know, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, or green, silver, and gold. And it's pretty straightforward, but it's had a fantastic take up, especially across the education front. And basically you do more as you engage more with the program. So at the moment we're trialing pollution, because what we found, and what I've personally found as a filmmaker, but also as a consultant and helping crews, is that you start talking about climate, everybody switches off. If you start talking about the local area of how's it affecting me as a mum coming in on the bus today, how's it affecting me on a small shoot last week where there's diesel generators, I'm standing there breathing in diesel, how can I affect change? And that is the part that I'm seeing that is really, really working in terms of technology, crew engagement, and education has been a fantastic real privilege to sort of be part of this journey that we're all in, all the colleagues here today are in. So yeah, I think it's Green Screen's one of many, and there should be many, because, you know, not one system fits all. And it's a real privilege to work with Film London and all the colleagues at Green Shoot, and every colleague around the world as a producer and as a consultant trying to help this sort of common mission to reduce our carbon footprint.
Fantastic. And Hemini, what about you at the EBU? What kind of work are you doing there? What are your members up to in terms of tackling sustainability on productions?
So very similar to what you've already heard, there's a lot happening on green production. So there's the same things, carbon calculators being used, making sure that certain shows are accredited with the STAR system. So that's predominantly happening in the UK, but in Germany, they've just had new standards come out. So if you want to work in Germany or do a co-production in Germany, then you have to follow some sustainability guidelines that have just come out, and that's going to be enforced for next year. Along with that, we do a lot of information sharing. So I think that's the key thing that keeps coming up, is that you can't do this work in isolation. You're working with many, many different parts of the industry, whether it's your supply chain, whether it's consultants, production companies, externals, etc. So the idea is to make sure that everybody's on the same page and working towards a greener production or a green production. We do a lot of events. We've had lots of roundtables on green production, calculators, carbon calculators, And at the moment, we're looking at the best practices for waste on production locations and sets. So that's something that's the big key one that we're working on. But going back to the budgets and stuff, I think that's all starting to change now. I think 10, 15 years ago, yes, there was this idea that if you go green, it's going to cost you more. And I think things have started to change where it's become, as new technologies, new ways of working comes in, there's this idea that everything that comes in is the norm, that it's greener. So therefore, when you purchase new LED bulbs or you buy bulbs, they're going to be LED, they're going to be greener than the old ones. So I think that whole transition phase is starting to change, and that's happening more and more through culture, through government legislation that's coming in to be more sustainable and greener and looking at climate change, industry initiatives, and your own organizations that you're working with. So I think we're in this weird transition phase, but I don't think you can turn around and say it's going to be hugely more expensive or a lot more expensive than it used to be.
You touched on that really interesting point about sort of a standardized approach. Is that possible, do you think, for productions using the same carbon calculators, certifications? Can that actually, I mean, obviously at the moment, people are testing the water, they're saying, oh, does this work, does that work? Are we, do you think, eventually going to get to a point where everyone is sharing the same standards and it's all going to work together nicely and harmoniously? Louise, do you want to come in there maybe first?
Oh, wait, that's a brilliant question. Yeah, and there are different ones, and as Melanie was saying before, production isn't one size fits all, and I think some of the calculators really do take that into account really well. They also need to be regionalized, of course, because the emissions factors, for example, of the electricity supply, heating supply, or what have you, will be specific to the region or the country that you're filming in. So there's some important kind of regional differences that need to be taken into account if we want to have that kind of level of accuracy. But also, depending on kind of the type of production and the size of production and whether it's film or TV, I think there is some differences. So I don't know that we ever will get to one system or if we should even. Definitely we should all work together, and I think that happens quite well already. You know, the BAFTA consortium, and then over in the States, the PGA have got the Sustainable Production Alliance, so that's all the kind of US studios and all their representatives have kind of a coalition, and they build their own sort of tools there. So I think there is a lot of really great collaboration already happening, and I think that will continue to build. I think, yeah, we absolutely need to make sure no one's reinventing the wheel here, because we don't want 5 different versions of a film and TV carbon calculator being built in silos from one another, because we could perhaps use that collective energy and get us all further, if we're not kind of doubling up. But I think that there is kind of scope to at the moment fit what works for your productions, I guess. And I think that will coalesce naturally anyway, as we all get better at this. So, we've only really been using carbon calculators since, well, probably like 10 years. And it's only really kind of taken off in maybe the last 5, where you're really getting huge numbers of people and they're all being refined and improved. So I think there'll be a natural evolution of how we measure and what tools we use to measure.
And does that vary depending on the size of the project? And also, not only in film and TV, but obviously, Michael, is the commercial world as well. I mean, is there an obvious crossover there in terms of how it's all being handled?
Yeah, Chris, there are a number of differences here. It's very uneven, and I think we need to all be aware of this, because our approach to this and Green the Bid, focusing more on commercial productions, has been incredibly open about their outlook on the individual markets, because they understand that when we're talking to the film production community in one country, it's not the same as the other, and it's critical that we, as a collective body of filmmakers, look at what we want to accomplish, and that we are communicating across the board. This is what we want to do. Okay, if we're going to be filming in your country, what does it take to accomplish this? And if that's not reasonable, then what can we do? At least let's be taking steps forward. Because there are times when the ground truth is that I'm sorry, it's just not going to be the same. We cannot accomplish today the same thing in all countries. And so I believe it's, and so far the spirit that we've encountered and I'm sure with all the panelists here, I would imagine we'd all be in agreement that there is a very good spirit of open-endedness, wanting everybody to pick up on this, learn from each other. We're in a very competitive industry, and in truth, we actually see an immense amount of cooperation and exchanging of information. But one of the things specifically you mentioned about advertising that I will address is the concept of course, we look at the issue of flights, and the carbon footprint is enormous on flights. And what advertising is notorious for is flying in a huge delegation of people for a commercial shoot when, well, it's questionable as to whether they all really need to be there, especially in COVID times when they've managed to not be there because they can connect remotely. And so moving forward, we're very hopeful that the commercial industry will be able to operate with flying in fewer people to shoot on location. Because honestly, when you fly them in just for a few days, it's not like feature film or TV series where, you're flying in a lot of people, but they're there for months. It's just not the same. We're flying in people for a few days. And so the feeling that the carbon footprint is just, it's harder to swallow. And so we really are aware of that and moving in that direction. And I think that, from top down, brands and agencies and through to production companies realize that in the commercial world, and they're moving in that direction to be able to do more on set with fewer of those stakeholders in present or on set.
Is that the case also, Phil, at ITV? Are you ever conscious of traveling less and perhaps smaller teams and introducing sort of little green initiatives on productions that perhaps you wouldn't have done before?
Yeah, I think whenever we've touched on COVID a little bit previously, but I think that whole experience that we're still going through at the minute, but really over the last 2 years has massively accelerated the progress of some of these different ways of working, which I personally think is really exciting. I try not to over glamorize the effects of COVID because it continues to be pretty horrific for a lot of people, but there's actually been some quite interesting things that have happened as a result of that. Great example, we've got a big entertainment show, Love Island. It's filmed on a Spanish island, so historically we've taken the whole crew, flown them over there, we've done this great big entertainment shoot, loads and loads of power, loads and loads of cameras, kit, etc. But due to COVID restrictions, what we were forced to do is carry out a lot of the production remotely from the UK, and we repeated that again this year as well. And so we're still working through what that looks like in terms of a carbon reduction. But even if there's a lot of energy going into setting that up in the UK, a lot of taxis, hotels, things like that, just to make it work and keep the show on the road, the emission savings from the reductions in flights are going to be significant. So how do we hang on to some of this really good stuff that's come out of the back of a pretty horrific situation and hang on to them? Because it's given us a bit of a boost. We're looking at a net zero 2030 roadmap. Well, we're already a couple of years into that. There's only 97 months left to go, not that I'm counting or anything. So yeah, let's keep on those really good things that we've done already, and figure out what else we could do in terms of innovation and cling on to some of those really good things.
And Louise, what about on Jurassic World and No Time to Die? I know you introduced quite a few impressive green initiatives on those productions. Can you tell me a bit about those, and including renewing the dinosaurs?
Yes. So we have various things. It's kind of always it's a lot of small or medium size wins, but across a large production. So No Time to Die, I think, was one of the first big features that used volt stack portable batteries, which were absolutely fantastic. Our electrical team were able to use them in so many kind of odd situations. So we had them on a sledge on the middle of a frozen lake in Norway to power the camera crane, and then in the back of a boat to get a marine shot in Jamaica. And we've got a great shot of them, a behind the scenes shot of the solar panels on the beach in Jamaica, recharging them as they're running something at unit base, and just kind of how they're silent, there's no emissions, they're on wheels, so it was great to see kind of how versatile that new technology could be, and You know, we've got the sound guy literally sitting on the thing that's powering sound because there's no noise from them. So that was really cool to kind of see that new technology in place. And that was the first production I'd worked on with them. Yes, we did find a company, Green Clover, who were able to recycle silicon molds and fiberglass molds. So obviously we had a lot of molds for dinosaurs on Jurassic, but also in construction use a lot of them for building sets as well. So it's quite, depending on the show that you can have quite a lot of those products. And previously there wasn't really anything we could do with them. On both shows, we also were able to send our stunt rigging wires back to Extreme Rigging. They now collect them all up, and then once they've got kind of a bulk amount, are able to send them back, and they go right down to the fibers that they're made of, because of course we can't reuse stunt wires. Once they're done, they're safety equipment, that's it, they're done. We can't use them as you know, for stunts and safety equipment again, but they're able to take them right back down to the fibers that they're made out of and recycle them. So it's a lot of little things like that. On Jurassic, which was a pretty big shoot, which got interrupted by COVID halfway through, well, not even halfway through, I don't think. We completely eliminated beef from our menu everywhere that we shot, and we shot in 4 countries, which was huge when you think of the size of crew on a big picture like that. It was huge, and absolutely thanks to our crew and our executive producer and our caterers for working that out. And actually it was a really simple swap. So that's something I always kind of approach. Not every producer is going to go for it, not every catering team is going to go for it, but it's certainly a question worth asking, and I think something that will happen more and more as we go forward, whether that is eliminate beef or meat-free Mondays, or, you know, I think that's something that the whole crew can be involved in. It doesn't necessarily need to be seen as something that's being taken away from you. It's kind of just an opportunity to do your part. I'm trying to think of other things we did now, you know, all the standard stuff, kind of anything that could be separated and recycled. We donated food, huge amounts of donated food on Bond, because it was very, very big and very, very long, and the very, very huge crew, which unfortunately did result in some food waste, just kind of how nimble they have to be and how over prepared almost they have to be. But I have to say, as far as kind of the wins that Phil was talking about, yes, flights, huge one. There's a lot more kind of telecommunications sort of now, but things like food waste as well, because we've changed our catering practices. The amount of food we waste has gone down so much. And yeah, the switch to paperless offices, we were on the way, but it is just boom. As soon as they didn't, you know, we didn't want an invoice going through 4 different people's hands to be signed off. DocuSign is now used for everything, and you know, POs are all digital, and start paperwork, and finally there's not this kind of like, oh, but we must print some call sheets, just a few, just in case. It's just, you know, I think that switch happened very much more quickly than it would have done.
And extending from that, question for all of you before we open up to questions from the audience. Can you tell me how the different teams, so catering, construction, transport, etc., can work together harmoniously? I know a lot of our listeners and viewers here will want to know, how can you work harmoniously on a set and tackle sustainability, particularly in this difficult COVID environment? Melanie, perhaps you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And it depends on the crew. But in my experience, if you have early communication, an early framework, you get your HODs together. We run green meetings for all the HODs with the producer, and then we move down to kind of the operational staff, and then we really engage and motivate all the assistants. So it's a collaborative effect, and also you just need that cross-department, you know, communication continuous. It's a bit like some of my colleagues here saying about really good signage, really good comms. We issue a green memo at the start, in prep, in development, in shooting, and in post. So and we keep updating everyone. This is what you've done, this is what you've recycled, this is the energy saving, this is the oil that hasn't been produced. And that kind of inspiration and kind of nudging people is really positive, actually, across productions. Not all of them, you know, we've got several at the moment, and some of them are just so tired with just dealing with COVID and health and safety that it's really challenging for them. And so we go in much more often and try and see what we can do. And I'm literally writing down some of the initiatives that Louise has just been saying, because it's really exciting being able to listen to everyone here as well. But communication and collaboration is absolutely key, sort of crossed, but through the departments.
Emily, do you want to come in there in terms of collaboration across the broadcasters, but obviously on productions as well?
I think it's already been covered. I think that's the main thing, is to bring everyone together, make sure it happens at the pre-production stage, happens throughout the whole process, and making sure that everybody knows what's going to, or what's asked of them. And I think it's a culture change. I think the more that people are going through green productions, the more you realize that this is going to be the start of the way of working. And it's that idea that it'll become part of your job, and there will be certain things that you will have to do. There'll be certain changes you will have to make. Even things like as far as I know, most people don't mind not eating meat once a week. I mean, a lot of people I know, for health reasons and various other areas, just are eating less meat, or they have more of a flexible diet. So I don't think there's huge amounts of work to be done, but it's just the idea that it continues, and I think it just becomes then part of routine and the way it is.
Very much so. And Phil, do you want to come in there as well?
Yeah, there's probably not a great deal extra I could add, because everyone's covered it off so eloquently already. But I do get asked this quite a lot, especially around where do we even start? Who should we be speaking to? And I do think it really boils down to a very simple principle of having a conversation. It's as simple as that. So talk to your suppliers, talk to your crew, talk to your cast and your writers and your editorial, your senior management, the junior runner who's just starting. Talk to people, and you'll find that a lot of the solutions either present themselves, or if you are asking people to do something different, which humans don't really like doing, by the way, then they're very much more open to that when it is sort of thrust upon them, I guess, because they're aware of the reasons for doing something that's maybe a little bit different for them. So yeah, I probably can't add anything other than that, but I too have been making a few notes there.
Michael, did you want to come in there before I address the questions from the audience?
Sure, Chris. Just to say that it's really a positive for us to be our partners, boots on the ground, are really they're listening to these requests, and honestly they're on the front lines of when we have foreign production houses, studios coming in to film with us. I mean, the actions that are taken locally, let's say to cut water bottles, have an immediate impact in their environment. It's not so much something that's happening in some other country. It's right there. And so the awareness, the local awareness, I think, is key. And so, as sort of agents on the ground, if you will, we're all the more inclined to acknowledge and identify with the interest in being sustainable. And so I think that those coming in from outside to film on location with us can be sure that they are going to find a very receptive bunch on the other end, just looking at what can realistically be accomplished in our markets. But certainly we're very much interested in engaging in that.
Fantastic. Right, I'm going to get to some of the questions here. So there's one here from Mark Hughes Webb, who asks, there seems to be an interesting allocation of production budget and resources, as it seems most TV dramas have 2 to 3 COVID coordinators and yet no sustainability coordinators. Is this an issue of putting short-term challenges and priorities over longer-term issues such as climate change? And is it fair to add to producer, production and location managers' workloads to deliver sustainability on set? Louise, do you want to come in there?
That's a good point. Yeah, we continue to hope that it remains a short-term thing. Right? We hope we're towards the end of needing COVID teams, and I think that was kind of a more emergent situation because it was have those COVID teams and protocols or not film. Now, really, we should be looking at, well, that's going to happen with climate change anyway. I have one production that I'm dealing with now that has just had to totally rejig their budget because they can't go and shoot where they need to because there's no ice and they need the ice, and they should be there. It should be there at this time of year, and it's not. There's another one I know that a colleague of mine's working on in another country, and they have had all their power and stuff cut from floods and landslides. The production team can't even get back to the city. So it's already starting to happen that some productions are either having to shift schedules, change what they're going to do and where they're going to go, or they're actually just being prevented from filming altogether by local kind of climate related disasters. So absolutely, we need to kind of think about it in that terms. I don't know how we make the shift so that right from the top, that's recognized. I think it's starting to be, for sure, in a lot of broadcasters and in a lot of the big studios. But yes, there do still need to be these boots on the ground and people implementing, the more energy and resource you put into managing this sort of thing on that production. So someone there is responsible and able to do that research and answer those questions and find who's going to take the stunt rigging ropes. That's not a great example as far as the climate impact, but new fuels, new technologies to reduce our fuel consumption and electricity consumption is the big piece of the pie now. But everybody's so stretched, whether you have COVID protocols and times or not, everybody in a production office has a very, very much full-time job and very long hours already. And so they don't have the space in their day to have this added to them. So yes, I think it does need to be someone else, someone's specific responsibility. Yeah, I mean, whether we had the step over all these people who are now working in COVID teams, and there are lots and lots of them around the world. If there is a switch to become sustainability personnel, I mean, I'd love that. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Didn't want the rest of the panel think, but
Emily, so you got your hand up there. Yeah, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just on the back of the example that Louise was giving. So there's actually, climate change is a real threat, and I think people are starting to forget that there's this idea that green productions, they're nice to have. It's all very soft and cozy. We just had a conference where one of our broadcasters was from Germany was talking about all the issues that they had just to give news to their citizens because of climate change. So with the floods happening, the wildfires happening, it's not happening on the other side of the world anymore. They're happening here in our back gardens. And it's not just about making a movie into a green way, because it's got to the point where they had to actually tell their citizens how the serious threat of the floods, etc., coming into the towns, to create warnings, etc., how to create warnings for those that need accessibility, so are hard of hearing, cannot see. So I think things are going to actually really have to change. It's not it's not just a matter of making nice movies, etc., because it's impacting real journalism. It's impacting people on a day-to-day basis. There are places where the floods are happening where they shouldn't have even been happening. So they had the idea of what to do for disaster recovery. So it's all very well talking about sort of it as an aspect of nice to have, but I think it's going to change, and it's going to change quite drastically quickly, just as fast as COVID came. I wouldn't be surprised if things carried on escalating in the same way they are now.
Phil, did you want to say a few words there? I'm also curious to know, is there a collaborative process between the COVID supervisors and the sustainability managers in terms of how to handle things on set?
Yeah, interestingly, with ITV, we very rarely use green consultants, green runners, etc. And our real thought process behind that is that eventually sustainability just needs to be everybody's job. I always liken it to health and safety, and I think that's maybe the end goal. But where I do think we probably need some support and a bit of additional resources, that transitional piece. So we can't carry on as business as usual, because in the broadest sense that isn't sustainable. We won't have an industry to carry on with. So it's a really interesting question. you know, we talked about it earlier in the panel discussion. Budgets are really stretched. It's a really delicate balancing act, and I think sometimes, you know, budgets just can't be found to put the right resource where it's needed, and that's where education, knowledge sharing, collaborations really come to the fore. But the flip side to that is there's absolutely a need for that expertise and that knowledge for, especially of a production of a certain scale, that it's an absolute requirement. So how do we make sure that the budgets and the funds are there to enable that transitional period over the next few years to get to where we really need to get to? And it's a really interesting question there.
Yeah, it is. Michael, there's another interesting question here, which I'm hoping you can address, from Hans Dale. It says, I believe we're learning that fuel consumption is the greatest impact on a production's carbon footprint. What tactics or practices are working in your productions and jurisdictions?
Gosh, well, we've already mentioned, of course, the airplanes and flights, and that's probably the biggest. But of course, also the discussion about generators is, I mean, Louise's comment about solar panels is so encouraging because it's so rare that the price point is such that, you know, we haven't gotten rid of the generators. And I give you just an anecdote. I was talking to our partner in Uruguay the other day, and you know, Uruguay is a country where 98% of the energy that's consumed is renewable, and yet the teams go on a production set in Uruguay, and there are the generators, you know, powering away. The smoke's coming out and everything, and they all just feel horrible about it. So, and it really is a question of price point. So you know, we need productions like what Louise has referred to pioneer, to break through. And for the technology to then trickle down at a price that others can reach, because right now it's just not happening in our experience.
Very much so. Louise, do you want to sort of extend from that?
Yeah, I can totally understand how that's happening, because the price point is, because it's new and there's not a great deal of units of batteries or hydrogen generators or what have you. And I think eventually it will trickle down as the various generations of battery technologies go, you know, it'll kind of move down, and also as they become more widespread. Economy of scale, same with anything, isn't it? But yes, I am acutely aware of the fact that is probably only a possibility for some of these kind of higher budget large features. I think High and TV are starting to use them now, but it can be a stumbling block with getting them on board and in the kit list to begin with. I think some electrical teams really like the batteries, so that helps because they just put them in their kit list and they're like, well, no, we need this, you know, and there's less. If I were to add it to a kit list versus a gaffer, less of a pushback, right? So that is really useful to get those people with kind of that bit more influence being the ones pushing these technologies, because they're great and they work and they're silent and there's no emissions right way. So if you're shooting inside, you can bring a little battery in if there's not enough house power. So it's going to be a bit of a slower trickle to begin with, but I think it will there'll be a tipping point where that price point does become more available. So a lot of the work that I'm doing with pilot programs, either with batteries on their own, batteries hybridized with diesel generators, but running the diesel generators on HVO, or, you know, the big system where it's a battery with solar panels and a diesel generator. So you've kind of got that sort of jigsaw to make up your power. A lot of the work I'm doing is just data gathering. So what is the business as usual cost if you just had red diesel, which of course we know the tax exemption is going to disappear on April 1st anyway, versus, you know, if you hybridize with a battery, or if you bring just batteries in instead of this. So a lot of what we're looking at is what is the green premium on that potentially new technology, but also what's the fuel saved and what's the CO2 saved. So where can you get the most bang for your buck with these various different options? You know, so it might cost a little bit more, but if you have huge CO2 and fuel savings, the fuel savings are cost savings, right? It costs every litre that you use. So I'm trying to do a lot of work at the moment across several productions to try and work out where that best value is placed. And sometimes it may, with those new technologies, still be more expensive, but it always looks more expensive up front because the rental on these things is always higher than the kind of standard equipment. But if the fuel savings are enough, that closes that gap. But you can't prove that until you get to the end of a production and you've got all your numbers. So selling it to a producer at the beginning can be quite a tricky sale, because you're promising something that until you've done it once, twice, or 3 times and proved the concept, you don't have something in front of you to say, it works, I'm telling you. It's not really going to be as expensive as it seems on day one of the shoot, versus, you know, when you factor in what those savings from efficiency and on the fuel uses. So we're getting there. I think in 1 or 2 years' time, it's going to be a different story, I think, because then we're going to have enough data to kind of really see where we push. And then again, it's back to pushing the supply chain. It's all those big players, the broadcasters, the streamers, what have you, who have lots of production work going on, working with their supply chain to say, if you build this kit, we will hire it. And kind of giving them the confidence to build enough of it that it becomes more affordable. You know, they're not going to invest huge sums in building 200 units of something if they don't feel like someone's going to hire it once they've manufactured it. So I think that's where we are at the moment. And I can see it very quickly taking off, but I think it's going to take maybe another year or so before.
Yeah, I agree. Melanie, you were nodding your head there a bit. Do you want to add some thoughts before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating what Louise is saying, and I echo that. I mean, just on one of our shows, a tentpole at the moment, from data tracking on the last season, 60% of their carbon footprint was fuel. So we are going to be piloting, you know, EV, solar, you know, alternative options this year, but it's slightly easier for them because they're fixed in the studio. So we've got a company coming in to do some pilot testing. But I'm really excited, you know, about volt stacks, about, you know, battery technology, new innovation, and that will lead the way. And also, we have to drive the companies as well, that, you know, obviously the investment in generators, the new technology in LED lights doesn't need, you know, 120 kVA bloody generator crossing London. It really doesn't, you know, and those generators fit for purpose, needs those kind of communications with, you know, very autonomous departments can work in. You need someone like a green steward, a green consultant to say, have you got a generator that's fit for purpose? What if you are using LED lights? You can use a volt stack, and they're brilliant, absolutely fantastic. So I think I'm just echoing Louise's comments, and I think it will take a few years, but I think the innovation coming in and the will to change is there. I think it's coming.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And extending from that, there's a really good question here, which I was going to ask you guys anyway, actually, from Lawrence Johnson. Is anything being done in relation to the building of all the new studios? There are a lot cropping up across the UK and elsewhere as well. Are they being built to high environmental standards? Do we have a national regional strategy, or is it simply left to those companies' discretion? Phil, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, I'm just sort of laughing when you talk about national strategy for anything at the minute, but that's a moot point, I guess. It's been quite amusing over the last few years in a really nice way, in that it feels like everyone who's announcing a new studio complex is stating it's going to be the greenest ever, the most sustainable ever. And I think that is a reflection of where, specifically in the UK, where the market's at right now, in terms, and where the sector's at, because that's the direction of travel. That's what people want. And we've seen the likes of all the major UK broadcasters, some of the major producers as well, start talking about mandating Albert certification, for example, for all of their production. So people have to choose the right suppliers who are going to be able to help them meet those criteria. And it's really pleasing to see, especially the new ones that are being built very much have sustainability front and center. But also some of the more traditional establishments are doing some really great stuff as well. There's a fantastic photograph that I've used several times on several presentations of Pinewood, and they've completely covered the roof in solar, so they can actually generate their own power on site as well, which is really interesting. But I think studios can help in terms of clean electricity supply. They can make sure that there is sufficient EV charging infrastructure on site, that the waste provision is there, just to enable production teams to make the right choices and not present barriers. I think they've got a really significant part to play in this whole puzzle.
So, how many of your thoughts on that?
No, just as what everybody else has echoed, there's I think the UK does very well in publicising the sustainability initiatives that it has, as opposed to some of the other European countries. So No, just echoing what Phil and has spoken about already in studios.
Louise, you've got. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, Emily's quite right to pick me up on that. I've just focused on the UK, but conversations with a new facility in Berlin, exactly the same. There's a new place in the south of France, exactly the same. It's starting to happen globally, which is, I think, super exciting. So thank you, Emily. Wrist slap there for being too UK centric.
Louise, you've had. Go on, yes, Michael, go ahead. Yeah.
Just going to say, you really have to send the work that way, where you see those initiatives being taken, where you see companies investing in these things. I mean, you have to encourage that, and the way to encourage it, I mean, the market basically has to put its money where its mouth is. And so, we see a case where, for example, our partner in Spain, which happens to have worked both with Melanie on The Crown and also Phil on Love Island, it's the same service company in Spain. They've been incredibly pioneering in using solar power in their studio over the last few years, reducing water bottle consumption on set. I mean, and they've done it all at no added cost, which is an amazing feat in today's world. So, and this is both in a commercial and also long form environment. So I think, by sending the business where service companies and then their vendors are ultimately acting on sustainability is going to encourage those who maybe haven't taken the steps just yet to realize it's time to clue in and get on the bandwagon.
Fantastic. And Louise, quickly, before I move to the next question.
Yeah, sure. So just as far as kind of the infrastructure and stages, we're at the beginning of phase one of exactly that as far as kind of a strategy goes. So I'm working with the British Film Commission, who have commissioned some work on exactly that. And it's in sort of a few strands, because you can either look at a studio like Ealing, which has been standing for a long time. Now, you're not necessarily going to affordably be able to go into retrofit something in a studio that's been standing for decades and decades. There's then the new build. So if you are starting from the ground up, then what would we suggest? Because you've got kind of a blank slate there. And then there's the kind of retrofitting of, something like Pinewood, who might have an extension happening, or there's something that you can do with the M&E in between. So as I say, we're very early in the beginning stages of looking at what those various solutions are and how effective and how affordable they are. But the idea being that there will be some recommendations presented, and as it's kind of BFC funded, it will be available to all, just to provide a bit of sort of framework and guidance on what the options are really, and to have gone out so that each studio, as they're kind of putting these plans together, doesn't individually have to go and do this research, right? Let's do it again. Let's stop doubling up. We can do it once. We can kind of put those things forward, and it won't be a one size fits all, but at least we can look at what's out there and find out what the options are.
Fantastic. Okay, so next question, another really good question from Mark Downs. Does the panel think green on-screen messaging is as important as greening behind the scenes? Can we nudge audiences into normalizing sustainable lifestyles rather than preach to them? Should we kick off with Phil maybe on that one?
Yeah, I'd argue it's way more important. So as a sector, as an industry, in comparison to a lot of other industries, our footprint's relatively small. But I think that the most significant part that we've got to play in the climate change puzzle is actually getting the message across to the public, to our viewers, to our audiences. And I think that there are many ways to do that, and it doesn't have to be specific to each genre, but we see some great examples, for example, on our soaps on Coronation Street and Emmerdale. I talk about these quite a lot. They're the perfect platform to normalize really good sustainable behavior, because you don't have to ram it down people's throats. You can literally do something quite subtle, and there's some really good examples. It's actually where I started my sustainability journey with Emmerdale, where we took away plastic straws from the Woolpack before the plastic straw ban came in. We've had an electric van that powers the local shop that produces local and seasonal and organic produce. The Woolpack menu's got locally produced food, just little things like that, but lots of them. And so when people come to see, and this was way before things like disposable cups were being phased out and people were bringing their own refillables, we pop them in the cafe. So people are starting to see them on screen. And so when they see them in real life, it's not so alien, it's not so unusual. And I think that's quite a subtle but powerful way that we can use our medium to really good effect.
And Hemini, are your broadcasters sort of on top of this as well?
Yes, Phil already knows there was a content pledge that happened around COP26. So a number of our members, along with other broadcasters, have actually pledged to put these normalized sustainability messaging in all genres of their program content. So that's something that's that's starting to look at, and that's starting to happen across the membership, and yeah, that a number of our members have done that across Europe. So and so, well, that's the other big thing that's coming up in trying to put those messages in sports and big sports events like the Olympics, etc. And but if then I'm sure Phil will be able to give you exact details on how they do that.
Phil, do you want to come back on that quickly, or should we?
I'll let someone else have some airtime, but it's really exciting. I think the climate content pledge with 12 broadcasters at sign up, and I'm sure more to follow, is such a significant step change, and I think that's really exciting opportunity creatively as much as anything.
Brilliant. Melanie, put your hand up there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I've gone back into producing, 2 years ago, was the frustration of the lack of normalization around climate. The only way we are going to normalize climate change is in culture and in education and in our storytelling. And that was one of the reasons why I formed Fingerprint Content with the former Secretary of State, John Kerry, who's Biden's climate envoy. He's one of the founding partners, is to normalize us. It's really critical that this climate pledge is absolutely, because it's shocking that I'm on the looking at all the BAFTA titles. There's not one title in any genre that's approaching climate, nothing. And so they've got to do it. You've got to step up, and Fingerprint Content has been created for that, to create a global climate hub to enable new voices to come in. And and I'm really excited by what's the pledge that's happened at COP, and let's see if it's let's see how it moves forward.
And there's another question here, a really good one actually to end on. It says, I'm interested to learn whether there has been any resistance on set or in the production chain to any initiatives geared towards sustainability, perhaps purely because it represents a change of approach or behavior. Who wants to kick that one off? Michael, do you want to start?
I'll just say one thing. It's a bit of a positive negative on this one, in the sense that our experience has been, and this came up earlier in the discussion, that communication at the top of everything, right from the beginning, heads of department, and moving it on down the line through the departments, as long as people on the entire production are informed of why we're taking these measures, the resistance is in our experiences has been minimal. That's key. And then the other thing I'll add is also, as I've mentioned, is that it's being realistic about the expectations in each country. I mean, there are things that we just cannot do today in certain countries. And so I think it's important that both studios and brands and agencies, when it comes to commercials, I mean, we were working with a consumer goods company, multinational. We are actually working with one, and they're shooting something right now in West Africa. And this particular company is pledged to reduce all travel and work only with local teams. So the mandate came down, and we said, and you're shooting where in West Africa? I mean, there was no local crew anywhere that could execute to their expectations. So we had to bring people from outside, but it took them literally, it was a beat where they had to sit back and go, oh, then we can't keep our promise on this production. I said, well, I'm afraid not if you're shooting in that country. So it is a bit of a reality check, but I would insist that as the boots on the ground in the production trenches, we're ready to engage, and we're very much looking to do everything we can within reason.
100%. Louise, in terms of resistance on set to some of the initiatives introduced?
I would say back in the day when I first started doing this, definitely. But we've always done it like this. Yes, and it's not working, less so now. I think in the last 2 or 3 years, And I would say I remember noticing the Blue Planet effect with crews, and all of a sudden people from all sorts of departments would come into my office and say, hey, we're using tens of thousands of, I don't know, shoe coverings or whatever, and they're plastic and this is bothering me. And people really used to come up with ideas, and they'd point out things that their department was doing that they realized was a problem. And so you had more eyes and ears on it and more brains thinking about it. And that being a really kind of helpful tool to kind of have, you not swimming against the tide anymore, essentially. Now, not really, no. I think in the last 2 or 3 years, I think the Greta effect as well, there was a marked difference when the kind of Fridays for Future started up and things like that. So I think there's the public awareness, and that being amongst the crew as well has shifted quite significantly in recent years. And so from the crew level, no. And I think conversely, from kind of the top down, the people able to make the decisions at the top of studios have kind of come to the same conclusion around the same sort of time, whether that, I think that's just kind of pressure from every direction. So yeah, I'm glad to say I don't really come across too much from a behavioral change. I think most people are now aware that this is a pretty emergent situation we're in, and we don't have a lot of time, and we need to change, and it's uncomfortable. And when we're in a field and we are entirely responsible for our own power, and if something goes down with the new technology, we're not filming that day, and whoever ordered that piece of technology is the one whose neck is on the block. I think that there's still a little bit of unease. So again, as Mike was saying, it's education, it's all these trials and pilots. So we might take batteries or a hydrogen generator with us. We might take a diesel generator as a backup still, with the hope that all we do is not turn the thing on. But if it makes you feel better for the first time we use this one, when we are very far away from any alternatives, and this is going to stop us filming, then let's do that. Let's cover the Jenny hire this time, so that we've got the backup that makes you feel comfortable and willing to try this thing out. And again, that is very much a privilege of studios who are willing to put the money into that, but also productions that are able to, which, let's face it, is not many of them. But if we can be the pilot and the test case and the guinea pigs for that, and then it's been trialed out when you kind of work down to lower budgets, then it just kind of embeds itself in the system, and that same gaffer's used it before in another show, so that they don't have that reticence anymore. So I'd say we're moving at a rapid pace as far as kind of hearts and minds go.
Yeah, completely agree. Phil, your thoughts on that? And also, I'd be curious to know for all of you actually how you see the post-pandemic landscape changing, and whether we can even envisage such a thing at the moment. Phil?
Yeah, I think it's really, I'd amplify what everyone else has said. I've been dealing and really engaging with our global production business, so sort of moving out beyond the UK, and we operate in 13 different countries, and unanimously, I've been pushing against an open door. I mean, some people are admittedly starting right from scratch, some are already quite progressed, and we're all on this same learning curve, just different parts of it. But yeah, to a person, everyone we spoke to so far has just been, okay, yeah, no, this is what we should be doing. I get it. What do you need me to do? Where can I start? So that's been really pleasing. I think that's really exciting. In terms of post-pandemic world, who thought we'd still be here now, right? I've just dusted off my festive face mask from last year, and we nearly threw them away because we're not going to need these ever again. So I'm finding it personally quite difficult to see what it will actually look like beyond this particular period that we're in right now. And we talked about it earlier on, didn't we, around how do we hang on to the best bits of what we've had to adapt to. And there's the sort of famous saying around, necessity is the mother of all invention, and we've had to do quite a lot of significant change to how we operate in a really short period of time because we had to, and actually that gives me a lot of hope. So I think if we can look beyond the world of COVID that we're still going through right now, I very much take an optimistic view that we've just proven that we can adapt really quickly and do things differently when we need to. By the way, we still need to. We haven't got there yet in terms of climate and net zero and all the rest of it. So yeah, interesting question. I'm not convinced there's an actual answer because we don't know what it looks like yet. But
No, quite.
yeah,
Who does?
yeah.
Melanie, your final thoughts, and yours, Hemini, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the you know, my colleagues here. I think it's going to be really interesting how it unfolds. I mean, obviously health and safety and the safety of our crews and supply chains first, but one hopes that, for me personally, I hope legislation will lead the way as well. I hope that there's a green tax credit from the DCMS to allow young filmmakers and everyone to have green runners, green consultants on set. And I hope this time when we do this type of panel again, we're double. You know, that's my hope for it, because we need it. And as we've all said, we're in a serious emergency and we need to radically change very quickly. And that's not really ending on a positive note, but
no, but it's an important one. And very quickly, Hemini, your final thoughts before we wrap up.
Same. I just think that well, I think a lot of it depends on how long this COVID period is going to last. And I think if it is going to last for another year or so, I think the good bits that we want to take, I think they will stay, and they will just end up being the way it is that we work now. And I think it's just, as everybody said, as things have moved on throughout time, if once that becomes the norm and it'll stay that way, then that's how we're going to work. And we've already started seeing that with travel budgets being cut, etc. For example, that was happening last year when people were expecting everything to be back to normal today. So yeah, I think in the sad sense, the longer it continues, the more normalized way it is that we'll be working, and it'll just be the way it is.
Sadly so. Listen, thank you so much to you, the panelists. You've been brilliant. And thank you to the attendees for coming and watching us today. You can watch this video from tomorrow on our YouTube channel.